I don't know about you, but I'm just trying to quantum leap out of here. So one of my life's purposes I know is to dispense information. This is a crazy theory for entertainment purposes only. There's no way this is possibly true. I'm going to talk to you about some theories I have behind the number 33. I trust that this absolutely fictional information will reach the right people. Harry Truman was the 33rd president. 32nd by some counts because Grover Cleveland had 2 terms. Harry Truman was also a 33rd degree Freemason. In United States history, we are taught that George Washington is the first president. He was also a Freemason. And what's really interesting, did you know there were presidents before George Washington? He was the first president after the U.S. Constitution was signed. But in American history, we don't tend to learn about those. Didn't know those existed at all. I just remember a portrait of George Washington hanging in every classroom. Maybe some of you remember the same thing. It was an unfinished portrait. It was like they said the painter just stopped. And it was George Washington with like a cloud at the bottom where it was just empty canvas. They considered George Washington to be the master builder, like the cornerstone of the United States Constitution. Freemasonry hinges around the fact that you don't have to build an actual building. You can build a building anywhere in your mind. And hidden knowledge that was taken out of the Bible by King Solomon, which, fun fact, Harry S. Truman, the 33rd president, who was also a 33rd degree Mason, his middle initial was S, Harry S. Truman. And it didn't stand for anything. Some people say it stood for Solomon, which was a family name of his, like King Solomon. All this does is prove to me that we live in a gigantic storybook. We live in the Matrix. Everything's connected. Nothing's a coincidence. Another fun fact about the number 33 is that it was exactly 33 years from the time William McKinley was elected, that was when the gold standard was upheld, until the events of the Great Depression. McKinley was elected in 1896. The famous Wall Street crash of the Great Depression was 1929. That's 33 years difference. In 1933, FDR, a Freemason, signed an executive order, Executive Order 6102, to make it illegal to own gold privately. 33 years after that, the United States government issued the first warning that the gold standard may not last. Nixon officially ended the gold standard in 1971. Now, let's talk about the death of FDR. He was a 32nd degree Mason. Died April 12, 1945. 33 years later, in 1978, the petrodollar system was formalized. The petrodollar system, that's a rabbit hole for you. A lot of us have just grown up with it and really didn't know there was anything else. That's the thing about history books, and that's the thing like we're seeing now. So many of us, like I'm 49. I see some of the information on social media being shared. I'm like, these people just Googled this, and Google told them wrong. ChatGPT might even be telling them wrong. Some of us were there. We lived through things, and we see these people 25 years younger than us acting like experts on stuff, and it's like, that's scary because we were there. It's happened to us too. I'm sure when we were young we did the same thing. We're still doing it. We're just reciting what was taught to us through history, and that's a scary thing. Teddy Roosevelt knew the power of that. I could go on forever about Teddy Roosevelt and what I think he did to William McKinley, his predecessor. The Roosevelts are all over this. Look, we war not against flesh and blood, okay? It's against principalities and powers of spirits. I'm not saying anyone's evil. I'm just saying we live in a matrix. We live in a gigantic storybook. I've had so many matrix glitches. I know you have too. The petrodollar system ensures the global sale of oil. Rockefeller's influence, okay? When Rockefeller sold Standard Oil, his wealth exploded, okay? If you look in the United States history books, we are told that it was a monopoly. I mean, I don't remember a whole lot about it. I just know now, looking back, I'm like, man, we were lied to. You heard that the Roosevelts were just the best thing ever. Teddy Roosevelt, muckraker, Ida Tarbell. I don't know if you remember learning all that. If you're outside the United States, I'm sorry, that's some U.S. history. And people outside the United States are taught completely different things about U.S. history. If you're watching this channel for my intuitive card readings, this is why it's hard for me to do them right now. My brain doesn't want to think about any of that. My brain wants to think about this. So John D. Rockefeller's wealth exploded after the sale of Standard Oil, okay? Teddy Roosevelt, after his predecessor, William McKinley, died. And guess what? William McKinley was assassinated. We weren't there for it. We don't remember all this stuff because we weren't there for it. We just take what was handed to us in history. Teddy Roosevelt knew the power of Twitter, of social media, TikTok, before it even existed. The way all this stuff happens is Freemasons, whoever, manifest it, and then the world bends to it. I know it doesn't seem that way. I know because we read the Bible, and you see all this stuff happening in Revelation. That means it must be true. It means somebody put ideas in your head, and it's coming to fruition, and you're watching it all around you. You don't have to accept all that. The Freemasons, King Solomon started this. He took all kinds of hidden knowledge out of the Bible. Anyway, let me go back to Teddy Roosevelt. If there is such a thing as past lives, I was definitely involved in this, because every time I hear about Teddy Roosevelt or any of this, I get upset in ways I can't even describe, like a deep upsetting. William McKinley didn't want to break up the monopoly of Standard Oil. He is suddenly assassinated, okay, by a Polish immigrant. And I'm just going to say, crazy theory for entertainment purposes only. Teddy Roosevelt was William McKinley's vice president, and he talked crap about him all the time. I mean, he said horrible things about William McKinley. Was famous for it. When McKinley was assassinated, that's when Roosevelt became president. He just happened to be conveniently out hiking when McKinley was... stuff I don't want to say, even though this is a crazy theory, it couldn't be true. Just awfully convenient that Teddy Roosevelt was out of town, and that they just somehow happened to find some Polish immigrant. They tried to make it sound like it was some lone anarchist. No. They scouted that guy out. This happened at the World's Fair, also called the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. It was a big deal. They used to put on a whole thing for the World's Fair. It looked like a whole city. People see pictures from back then and they think Tartaria, and like if you're on TikTok, you know what I mean. They think it means something. No, they would just put up this huge World's Fair and take it down. Well, it was insane. William McKinley went there to shake hands with people. Well, he gets stabbed by this Polish immigrant, this young guy. A lot of people think it was a conspiracy because McKinley held out on the gold standard. He favored the gold standard, which others like Rockefeller and people, they didn't want that. They wanted fiat currency, which was not the gold standard. So what we learned in U.S. history books was that Teddy Roosevelt did this great thing by breaking up Standard Oil, okay? And we also heard about muckraking. You hear about all these letters he wrote. Oh, it must be true because Teddy Roosevelt wrote a letter about it. You know, like if you go through history, there's a bunch of letters like he wrote to FDR when he was marrying his cousin Eleanor. Like it really means something. Like just because it came from the desk of Teddy Roosevelt, are we taking his word for anything? Like that's what I'm saying about him knowing the power of social media. He put out a letter, and just because it was on a letter, we just take his word for it. You know, it ends up in history books. Oh, this must have been what happened. It's the equivalent of some Yahoo uploading a video somewhere and someone finds it. William McKinley was assassinated. Teddy Roosevelt comes in, changes everything, okay? According to what I believe is Rockefeller, I think he and Rockefeller were in cahoots on it. Because Teddy Roosevelt acted like he was such a hero because he broke up Standard Oil. By 1900, John D. Rockefeller owned 90% of the oil in the United States. So it was in the U.S. history books, we're taught that, oh, Teddy Roosevelt came in and broke up this monopoly, this evil monopoly. And it was such a blow to the Rockefellers. Rockefeller went from owning 25% of Standard Oil to owning a portion of 34 different companies. This was after the Sherman Antitrust Act. When Standard Oil broke apart, his wealth was estimated to be $300 million. 2 years later, his wealth had doubled to $900 million. By the time he died in 1937, his wealth had reached $1.4 billion. Now, back to Freemasonry. Rockefeller is not considered a Freemason, but you can dive down that rabbit hole if you want to. I know I just rambled. I'm going to ramble more later. I'm just trying to quantum leap out of here. Thank you.